So, John, what's margin erosion? You've mentioned that term to me before.
Okay.
Okay. Let's start with what it is and how companies actually go through margin erosion without even realizing they're going through margin erosion from your perspective and all the research that you've done.
Can I answer that with a little or a couple of little stories?
For sure, mate. Go for
Okay.
gold.
Some years ago, I was doing some study and I had to write a paper. And so I chose to write about transacting in the construction sector. Now, rightly or wrongly, I actually chose to write about one of my projects. And I was a little bit perturbed when I dug into it. Literally 4 seemingly innocuous little mistakes, unconnected, or so I thought, didn't mean much at the time, but ultimately when I literally researched through it, those 4 little mistakes cost me 6 months in time and over $100,000 in margin.
Damn.
And I thought, if that's happening to me, I wonder if it's happening to others. And so I actually went out and did some research of companies in the construction sector. And I came to the conclusion that somewhere between 20 to 50% of gross profit margin was being eroded away. Little stuff ups here, that not going quite right there, all eats away. I went and spoke to a plumber. And I asked him, well, what's your margin at contract time? And he said, look, I get 38%. It's pretty good
You
margin.
said plumber gets 38%.
Pretty good. A lot of maintenance work.
All right.
Charge up.
Yep.
Okay. But what's your margin actually when it's all done? Well, I don't know. So we jumped on Xero and had a look at his books, and it turned out to be 20.5%. Still reasonable.
Pretty decent, yeah.
But that's 17.5% of margin gone from the time of contract to delivery. Now, he was turning over $3.6 million a year.
Right.
That's $630,000 just walking out the door. That's margin erosion.
Interesting. So what were the root causes of this, if you can talk about them, or some of the key aspects, or, yeah, what were they? Give us a few examples.
It literally comes down to productivity. And for him, it was his team and the way he was communicating with his team. The message wasn't getting through, and things, they were making really basic critical errors and having to go back and fix things up. Now, when you've got callbacks, that's just eating into your margin.
For sure, yeah.
Right? It's things like that. But that's at one end of the scale. Last year I was talking to the CEO of a Tier 1 construction company in Australia.
Right.
And I asked them the same question, what's your margin? He said about 12%. And what do you actually get? About half that.
If they're lucky.
If they're lucky. Now, his last project was 1.3 billion.
Right.
So that's about 80 million out the door. It's a serious problem. And one of the things that I found in my research was that McKinsey did a study on productivity in the construction sector. And they came up with something like $1.6 trillion a year is lost in productivity.
But at the end of the day, we are human beings, John.
Of course we are.
We are prone to make mistakes.
Of course we are. It doesn't have to be that way. And that's the problem. It's the human factor. And we overlook that human factor.
Yeah.
If we go back to what I made a comment about earlier, about complexity is easy to create, but hard to implement.
Yep.
That's the problem. We're creating complexity in all the little things that we do and not thinking about this is the process that I need to follow to make sure that I actually do the job as effectively and as efficiently as possible.
But it's pretty similar to what Toyota have always done, right?
Yeah.
It's how do they push out that many cars a minute from their factory? Yeah. It's the agile concepts that they use to.
Absolutely.
That's pretty similar to what you're talking about. It's I had an agile person on my podcast earlier, Mark Parson, he was explaining it to me. Plan, do, check, act.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a simple process. But the story of Toyota or even a Formula One pit crew is amazing. Like, they can change 4 tires in less than 1.8 seconds.
It's amazing, isn't it?
10 years ago,
Yeah.
10 years ago, it used to take them close to about 8 to 9 seconds to do the same thing that it takes them 1.8 seconds to do today. How crazy is that?
Can I give you another example?
Yeah, go on.
You mentioned Agile. The organisation Influential You that I'm involved with, we did some work with our Teams program with Western Digital over in the States. They were implementing an Agile framework, but they also used our Teams program, and it made a difference.
Right.
Their time to market from an idea through to delivery was about 18 months. After doing our Teams program with their scaled Agile, it was down to 4.5 months.
Wow. Right.
Now, that's the power of actually transacting effectively.
Right.
Right. So that's the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah.
Is that if we don't transact effectively, we're going to lose productivity. We're going to lose the margin that we fought hard to get in the first place.
Yeah.
And you think about construction companies; they really work hard to get the margin.
Yeah. Absolutely. They work night and day.
And most of the time that just gets eroded away. Doesn't have to be.
Yeah.